last question, we're going to compare two different linear functions. So we have f of x equals negative 3x plus 9. So that's our first function. Sorry about that. Okay, so our first function is f of x right here. And then g of x is the second function is in the table. So I give you f of x as an equation and g of x as a table of values. And we're going to compare some things about this. So part A says which function has a greater average rate of change. So let's see. What's the average rate of change for f of x? Average rate of change for f of x is negative 3, right? So rate of change for f of x is negative 3. What's the rate of change for g of x? Let's look at the table and see. As 8, it increases from the first pair of values to the second pair of values, it goes from 8 to 12. That's up 4, and that was on an interval of 1. So rate of change is 4 over 1, just 4, right? So that's the rate of change for g of x. So which function has a greater rate of change? It shouldn't say average rate of change, it's linear, so it's a constant rate of change. Which function has a greater constant rate of change? Well, that would be g of x, because 4 is greater than negative 3. So that function in the table called g of x had the greater average rate of change, or constant rate of change. Part B, which function has a greater initial value? Initial value, so let's see. In f of x, I see this number here is the initial value, and that is 9. On the table, how do I find initial value? Initial value is a place where x is 0. So this would be the initial value. So initial value on the table was 8. So question is, which function has a greater initial value? Well, 9 is greater than 8. So f of x, the equation, had a greater initial value. So the answer is f of x. Part C, which function has a smaller output for an input of 3? So looking at the equation, I don't see an output for an input of 3, but I know how to find it. I could take the equation negative 3x plus 9 and put in an input of 3, right? Replace x with 3. That's an input of 3 and solve it. Negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. Negative 9 plus 9 is 0. So f of 3, right? Output for an input of 3 is 0 for the first function. For the function on the table, input of 3, I can actually see right here on the table. Input of 3 gets an output of 20. So let's see. Which one was greater? Well, output of 20 is obviously bigger than an output of 0. So g of x had the greater one. Actually, the question says which one has the smaller one. So that would be f of x, because f of x had 0, which is smaller than 20.